Okay. Okay, we've got it. We're in good shape. It's happening. All right. So that
Is
one's
that wishful thinking or actually? Because I'm still saying events starting soon.
on the LinkedIn
Showing.
side.
Yeah. Maybe I'll go out and go in again just to see.
And yeah, I've got LinkedIn coming as well. Yep, so it's running live. I'm gonna make a quick post just to showcase the folks that were here instead of the previous link. And I'll just update one thing and we'll be good to go. Cool. All right, back to normal here, folks. Thanks for the patience. All right, Kiara, Steve, thanks for making time today. And all right, you guys can hear me all right? We're in good shape? Cool,
Yep.
cool. All right, so first off, this is our AMA, and with Steve Cadigan. Thanks everybody for showing up. I know we've had a couple technical difficulties. If you're just joining, we're going to kick things off right now. It is a full-on AMA with Steve Cadigan. Previously with LinkedIn, when they were at about 400 people, grew them to 4,000, probably the most dynamic growth periods in tech. Welcome, Steve.
Great to be here. Excited for the conversation, you guys.
Yeah, no. Kiara, we've got you from WorkLeap. You are their senior talent management organizational development advisor. Your role here today is to help just facilitate some of the questions behind the scenes. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for making this session happen. Excited to dive in there, and thanks for supporting us on the comment side of things.
I'm very excited.
Awesome. So Steve, like I said, you started off, well, you didn't start off, and I'd love to just start there. But when you made it to LinkedIn, you grew them, you grew with them in such a wild capacity. You're the author of a book called Workquake, and I'd love to get into that. You're currently advising organizations like Google, Salesforce, the BBC, and really kind of like focused in on how to build cultures that actually endure. So really excited to like have this opportunity to chat with you. Yeah, just help us to get to know you a little bit better as well while we dive into things.
Okay. Well, first, thank you for inviting me here, and thanks all of you who are joining from your busy days and busy schedules. We hope this is going to be interesting and maybe even a little entertaining. A little bit of my origin story. So I grew up in South Africa as a youngster. We were kicked out of the country, thanks, Dad, when I was about 7, settled on the East Coast. Pretty much grew up as an American. Moved to California when I finished school. And then over the course of my career, pretty early on, I discovered HR, like probably 2 years out of college. I discovered recruiting. I discovered I love it. I discovered everything I love about human resources is really rooted in my joy and love of sport, which is trying to organize teams to win in different environments and seeing who performs better with certain colleagues, environments, coaches, leadership styles, environments is just fascinating to me. I love watching how athletes handle certain situations. And similarly, I love watching how professionals, how I can learn to set them up for success in different environments and situations. So over my career, I've had a chance to work in 6 different industries and live and work in 3 different countries, the US, Singapore for a couple of years, and then Western Canada for 4. And that's really given me a laboratory of, an opportunity to make lots of mistakes and learn from them, but also to, to sort of become a student of the world of work. And that's what I focus on today. So my last journey as a regular operator, I was the first chief HR officer at LinkedIn from a period of just massive hyper growth. It was 4 years that honestly felt like 500. And it wasn't just growing the number of people, it was growing the number of countries from 2 to 17, from offices from 2 to 26. You know, you throw in different time zones, different national cultures, and different product lines. It was just really intense. And also trying to compete against Google, Apple, Facebook, Twitter, who are using your product to recruit against you, was an interesting, ironic challenge. So I left after that journey, and have been, probably tuning my own business the last a dozen years or so, helping leaders, organizations, in some cases, countries build great talent strategies for the future. So I love what I do, and spend a lot of time teaching at universities, speaking at conferences. So yeah, I'm excited to be here today. Hopefully that lays
Awesome.
a bit of a contextual foundation.
Yeah, it does. And so we've got a handful of folks that are watching live on LinkedIn and YouTube. The purpose of this is an AMA, so we'll be getting questions from them. If you want to ask a question, just drop it into the comments like you were commenting on a YouTube video, or just a comment on a post in LinkedIn. That's how this all works, and that's where we'll see the questions. Kiara will, and then if there's a bunch of questions, folks, just like do a thumbs up on the ones that you're most interested in. We'll treat this sort of like a Reddit style upvote system, and we'll ask the most popular questions first. But there is a bit of a lag, so we'll give some time for folks to catch up to this. And I'm going to kick things off with my first question. If I mean, we were joking before the chat, where it's like, it's been a couple decades since LinkedIn, and you still get folks kind of like chirping you and dropping a message and like, oh, this could you get LinkedIn to change this feature, that sort of thing. So kind of a bit of a way back playback, but if you were to step into sort of like a 300 person, 400 person company right now, into that, chief HR officer, chief people officer, head of people role, what would you say you would be like? How would you be thinking differently as opposed to how things were back then?
If I were to go back into the similar environment, and also if I knew the plans were to grow as much as we ultimately grew, I think I would organize my approach differently. So probably the biggest challenge that I faced was every single year I was there, we grossly underestimated how much recruiting we were going to do. Okay.
Mhm.
Now, that's a problem when your main product is recruiting and you're struggling to recruit. Okay. That's not something you want your customers understanding that you're struggling with. And in retrospect, looking back and seeing, how we operated, most years it was, oh, we don't want to be a big company. We're only going to hire a couple hundred this year. And the first year I was there, we hired 500. The next year we hired 1,000. And the next year, another 1,000. And if you're not planning to do that, it is just a big cluster. It is messy and everyone's frustrated.
Yeah.
And so I think we didn't, and again, this is very ironic in retrospect, like a recruiting company, I don't think we respected the discipline required to really go through hyper growth. And so we didn't
Right.
plan for it. Okay. And no one's to blame, right? None of us had been through that before. Like we didn't know
Fair.
how this is supposed to work.
Fair.
Right. And so I think what I would say is, okay, you know, let's, project if we hire at plan, if we double plan, and what that looks like, and what's a reasonable time frame for that to look like, and what are the reasonable resources we need to implement. Keep in mind, at the time, we were the only company not using search firms at all. Like that was like, don't use the search firms. We're LinkedIn. You can't do that. So we're all brute forcing it ourselves, which was fine. It was a
Oh,
great forcing function. But that was probably the biggest thing, Martin. And maybe it's not as, like aha as some people think, but I'm telling you, if you're not prepared, and you don't plan for that kind of growth, it caused all kinds of churn and hurt feelings and disagreements and very distracting moments. Mhm.
Was it a matter of because nobody had gone through that level of hyper growth before? And realistically, at that time, there wasn't that much, like, there wasn't a ton of examples where companies had gone through that type of hyper growth. It's sort of like this element of you don't know what you don't know. So it's sort of like we're just going to take
Correct.
things day by day, or
I
was
mean,
it
I think it
something
was a
else?
little bit of everything, Martin, honestly.
Yeah,
We had Google alumni, we had Yahoo alumni, Oracle alumni, Microsoft alumni. I was from, coming more recently from Cisco, which was probably the biggest. We'd gone from 15,000 to 30,000, but I was nowhere near the driver's seat for that experience. I was
right.
more on the front lines. And so we didn't know what we didn't know. And we weren't sure we were going to be successful. I
Yeah,
mean, in retrospect, we're like, oh, it was a layup. How hard was that? An open net goal. Like, no. If you were to talk to any board member of the executive team and say, hey, in 2009, which is when I joined, did you feel your destiny was inevitable? You guys were going to crush it. I don't think a single person would say, oh, yeah, 100%. And so we didn't know we were going to be successful. We didn't know what the market demand was going to be. And so we're cautious. Similarly impactful to that lack of awareness or appreciation of how successful we're going to be was, I think, a big aversion to becoming a big company.
yeah,
Like we were all big company refugees, which is slow moving, bureaucratic, long time to make decisions, political. And we're like, we do not want to be a big company. And at some point, we're sitting around 2,000 people. At some point, the CEO finally came to terms and say, if we're going to realize our destiny of really changing the world, we're going to need a lot more people. Okay. So and then we just wound up with this constant, battle with ourselves of, oh, we don't want to be a big company. What does that really mean? And all these myths of, oh, we're a big company now, and trying to tackle that. And that inertia when you're growing of people starting to feel more removed from who we were or what that experience was like is really visceral and it's really powerful. And what we tried to do, and I think we did a reasonable job of it, was we try to have those conversations like, what's going on? I'll give you a great story. The CEO, Jeff Weiner, at the time, and I started doing these listening tours because when you double from 1,000 to 2,000, everyone's amount of face time with a senior leader becomes less. Okay. And
right.
senior
Yeah,
leaders' time with each other becomes less. So you have to almost intentionally plan to communicate 2 to 4x more than you did before. And it feels awkward and uncomfortable, but it's really necessary because the audience that needs to hear is growing and growing and becoming dispersed. And they're not familiar with the shorthand communication style that you had before. So we would do these listening sessions and listening tours. And we just ask two simple questions. What's working great? Like what
mhm,
is happening? And then what could improve, you
yeah,
know? And then we would hear, at one point we started hearing, we're a big company now, yeah. And so we're like, oh, what does that mean to you?
yeah,
And they would say, oh, so many emails. And so the CEO, bless his heart, Jeff was brilliant. He said, well, who told you to send emails? Don't send emails. If you don't like emails, don't send emails. And then very quickly, they realized that wasn't going to be successful. So let's go to another complaint, too many meetings. And he goes, okay, well, stop setting up meetings. I never told you to have meetings. And so you see the narrative there was, I'm now a victim, too many meetings, too many emails. And he's like, no, don't set up meetings and don't send email. If you think there's a better way, please contribute to owning, how we're going to build this organization. And that was just a little sliver of the kinds of stuff that starts happening when you double in size every year from a very small company. And that was probably the biggest advice that I would say to folks who are sitting on the precipice of hypergrowth is be ready for the myths to surface and
mhm,
go get them, attack them because they're going
right.
to happen. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's sounds like product research as well to a certain extent. Like you're just talking to the users, you want to like take all their feedback. How would you separate signal from noise in that moment?
It's tricky. It really is tricky, and I'll give you one time when the noise was super loud, but the signal was really not important. We started to do employee surveys every 6 months, and one survey started to reveal like, oh my gosh, we need a bus to San Francisco. And we're sitting in, Mountain View, California, which on a good day is a 40-minute drive. On a bad day is 2 hours. Okay. And that's
Yeah.
2 hours or 4 hours round trip away from family, away from friends. And that's not healthy. So we started hearing this noise, like it was loud and long paragraphs and all kinds. So I said, listen, let me do some research into this because clearly it's a hot button for people. So I researched all the postal codes of all the employees and found out a very small minority of employees actually lived in San Francisco, and a larger percentage lived further away than San Francisco. And then the cost for me to get 2 buses in the morning and 2 buses in the evening was going to be about $250,000. So those are some of the highlights of the research I did. Meanwhile, I'm also talking to Google and all the other companies saying, can we use your buses? Can we join them? Can our employees, can we share costs? And they're like, no, proprietary information. Your people can't be on our buses. I'm like, yeah, but we're partners. You're customers of ours. We're customer of yours. We're paying you millions. You're paying us millions. Nope, can't do it.
Wow.
So I presented all that to the loud minority of San Francisco employees. Okay.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, overgeneralization, most of your younger demographic, high energy, not married with kids are in San Francisco. You need that muscle. You need that energy if you're going to stand up a company. So that's a very important, it might be a minority. It's a very important demographic. So I invited him in and said, here's the data. $250,000 to do this twice a day in the morning and night. Most of the people, here's the scatter plot where everyone lives. We don't have a lot of folks in San Francisco compared to everyone else. Do you think this is a good use of money? And do you think it's fair for the other people who are in other more, further distances to not have a bus? And you know what they said? You're right. Thank you for doing the research. Probably not a good investment. Okay.
That's awesome. That's hyper transparent too, right?
Signal and noise. That's right. And let me tell you, that's probably the greatest moment of building trust and followership, following saying no.
Yeah.
It's like, we listened, we did the research. I didn't say no. I said, do you think this is the best use of money? I was going to say no if they said, yeah, screw it, we still want to do it. Now that feedback lasted probably a quarter, and then it was back to, we need the bus, and ultimately we did cave because it was a competitive necessity for us to recruit, really energetic, talent. Even though it was a fraction, it was kind of like the price of admission, right? Kind of like, beer on Friday or free food, it became, you kind of got to play. And we tried everything, like here's bus vouchers, here's, cab fare, discount, stuff. We tried so many other things. And at the end of the day, so here's a funny story. When we did implement, by the way, some of my executives were like, we need the bus. My employees want the bus. And one of the executives was our general counsel. She was like, we got to do this. All right, Steve, are you looking at the feedback? So we do it. And then we start the bus. And then she starts coming saying, hey, who decided the bus should take people home at 5:30? Had one of my key people jump out of our staff meeting to take the bus at 5:30. And I'm just like, I just can't win with you.
There's no
you want the bus and now you're pissed. Like, so organize your meeting time differently. What do you want? What do you want? Right. Oh, because you've got one person who wants to leave at 5:30. I should have all the other people leave at 6:30 now. It's like one thing after another. And that was just my life. Like, that was just a little microcosm of, it's just daily, arrival of new challenges when you grow.
No. That's literally get on the bus kind of mentality. I love that there was a real aspect to that. So we've got some great questions coming in here. So Cora, she's the head of people, and she kind of mentioned this. I'm going to do a bit of interpretive dance here, kind of interpreting the question, but she mentioned hearing about an aversion to becoming big is interesting, considering how many big company alums were hired in LinkedIn's earliest iterations. And I mean, if you get that, go for it. I've got an interpretation of it if you'd like clarification.
I mean, I don't know that I ever did any math on where we hiring from, big companies, small companies, medium companies, as much as, do you have the hunger and the capacity to tackle building something, right? Yeah. That was probably the one thing. And if we did make a mistake, and we made many, probably one of the bigger ones was when we were hitting a point where, like, okay, I think we're going to make it. We're going to become $1 billion company and hit $1 billion of revenue. Have any of you ever run $1 billion company? We looked around the table. Nope, none of us have. Hey, maybe we better get some adults in here who've done that, who can teach us how to run $1 billion company. So we did. And we failed and overlooked something really, really important. The people that we hired hadn't built $1 billion companies. They just run $1 billion companies.
Right.
And there is a huge difference between leading at scale and building to scale. Yeah. And yes, we made some goofs there. And that was that's my lesson. You really want that key hire to show your board. You got that person from Google, but they probably didn't build Google. and they're not going to be as helpful as you think. You're going to feel good because you hired someone from a fancy company with a big brand name. Your
Yeah.
board's going to be, oh yeah, you must be really knowing what you're doing, hiring high quality people from brand name companies. But if they haven't built, that's a sugar high that's going to wear out real quick, and that person's not going to succeed, possibly,
Mhm.
unless they have the right attributes and the right coaching. So, but I don't know that I ever paid a lot of attention to, are they from a big company or not? And, and by the way, where you were in a big company, like, were you there early? Were you there later? That's a real big differentiator, right? Rather
Mhm.
than you're from a big company, right?
Yeah.
Like, what stage were you? Because I really subscribe to this notion that all of us thrive better in different stages of a company's evolution, right? Or all of us are in our
Yeah.
wheelhouse, but are you better in when things are chaotic? Are you better fixing things when they're broken in a turnaround? Are you better running the trains on time, but you're not really a builder? Like, what inner and trying to be mindful of that and honest with yourself and with the people you're looking to hire, I think is really, really important, you know?
That
And
doesn't
our
get
problem was, like, we didn't really know what stage we were at,
yeah.
honestly. Like, it's just a fair, honest admission. Like, we really didn't, when we were growing, and we didn't want to be big, but at some point we had to roll in. And you talk to any hiring manager that was there the period I was there, 2009 through 2013, I promise you they don't have a lot of happy experiences of what it was like to recruit with us. It was hard, really
Yeah.
hard. And I didn't have a gray hair on my head at the time, just so you know.
2013, completely different.
Exactly.
We've got some great questions here, and we've got a handful of people that have just joined. So I just saw a number spike nicely. For those of you that are joining, just comment on LinkedIn to ask your questions. You'll see a bunch already there, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible. So Tasnim has asked, she's a senior HR consultant, and she's curious on your take in terms of managing performance in such situations with like massive growth. Like if the bar is always moving in terms of like what good looks like, or if the bar and scope of what your role is changing so much with that type of scale, how do you manage performance in that circumstance?
Yeah, you don't. You don't, honestly. I mean, I do not have a magic bullet for you here, and I can't look you in the eye and say, "Oh, we totally figured that one out." We didn't. Here's what we learned: who you hire, and being clear on your who you are, your awareness of your culture, and who's going to thrive. That's what I think is the best place I would focus on if you're early in hyper growth. Like, why would anyone want to work for you? Okay. And what is a high performing, what are the attributes of people who are really going to thrive in this environment? That's really important to know. Um, when you're growing that fast, it is a full contact, full court press. For us to grow double every year in size, that's not because we had a lot of recruiters. That's because 50% of your job, if you're hiring people, is recruiting.
Mhm.
And that is hard to grow a business when your leaders are spending 50+% of their time hiring. But when you're trying to scale, that is your job. That
Yeah.
is the company mission, right? And so I'll tell you how maniacal we got about this. The number one operating priority for us at LinkedIn, and by the way, we're the professional network. We better be really good at this, and our major product is recruiting. Our number one operating priority was always build a world-class team. Every meeting we had as a leadership team, as a company, began with, let's measure how we're doing building a world-class team. Wasn't new product, wasn't new engineering roadmap, wasn't the acquisition, plan, it wasn't the sales numbers or the earnings. It was, how are we doing building a world-class team? I will tell you, every company I worked for before LinkedIn always said, "Oh yeah, we love people. People number one here. The next board meeting, let's talk about succession planning. Oh, sorry, we ran out of time, Steve. We'll do it next quarter. But we really care about people here, right?" And if you're growing, that's one of the lessons I learned. And we didn't make people a number one priority because of me. It was because of our CEO and our executive team said, we want to be the best company that anyone's ever worked for.
Mhm.
And if you think about it, and this is pretty funny because we didn't realize it several years. I mean, I joined the company, was already 4 years old. We didn't probably realize it till our 6th or 7th birthday. Like, we're LinkedIn, we're the professional network. If we're not the greatest place anyone's ever worked, like, we're a fraud. Like,
Yeah.
that's our birthright. And so becoming clear on that. But I think, to answer the question, to go back to that, Martin, I think managing, and this is always a battle I had with our board, by the way. And I had two Netflix board members on my board. And those of you who are listening and know anything about the Netflix culture, let me summarize it for you. We pay you the best, we hire the best. And if you're not the best, well, you're out the door. And so they are subscribed to the Jack Welch, manage out the bottom 5 every quarter, and you got to do it. And so I went to our CEO, and because the board was on me, like, how do we know after all that hiring, you've hired top performers? Like, how do we know? And I'm like, I said, do you know how brutal it is to hire right now when Google can outpay me and Apple can outpay me and Zing is outpaying me and Twitter's outpaying me? They got better sushi chefs. Lady Gaga's coming over, singing to the employees over there. And I got my Uncle Jerry coming over, having flapjacks with me over here. Like, we got nothing. So do you know how hard it is to recruit? And now you want me to manage high performance too? Like, which one do you want? High performance team? The way I answered it, and I said to my CEO, I was like, you got to have my back in these board meetings because they're coming at me. Do you want that Netflix culture of everyone's looking behind their back to get shot because they're not performing? He goes, no. I said, well, then speak up at the next board meeting. But the second thing is, like, isn't the ultimate measure of performance, like, are we growing? Are we gaining market share? Are we seeing, that when you're growing that fast, you kind of have to take a more macro rather than we need people, because hiring is really hard and it's time consuming. And then you say, oh, and by the way, now that you're only spending 50% of your time recruiting, now you're gonna have to spend another 25%, managing out those low performers. It just, I don't think, the organization was ready for it.
Yeah.
And performance management is a whole nother rant, a rat hole that we could go down. I don't want to do that here, but I'm a big believer in coaching for strength, not coaching for weakness.
Right.
Especially when you're growing.
You naturally segued to Rachel Jacobson's question here, which is kind of cool. She's a chief people officer at Integrate AI. And basically her question is, how do you hyperscale culture?
Yeah. First, I love that question because it's not asking, how do you keep your culture? Which I think is the wrong way to look at it. Rachel, the fact that you're just asking that question, you've got 50% of what you need to know. You are never going to be the same company when you add 500 people. You're never going to be the same. And preserving that isn't the goal. Having an adaptive, evolutionary culture, because culture is an organism. It's organic. It's not, and we use words when we talk about culture, which are wrong, like foundation and pillars, these images that connote lack of movability or change. I said, so here's my suggestion, and it's going to sound trite and overly simplified, but this is how I think about it. If you're growing really fast, invite people to come in to make your culture better. Don't say, study up. Here's the tablets that the founders came down from the mountaintop in Silicon Valley with, study up. At the end of orientation, there's going to be a quiz. No, you say, listen, these are things that are really important to us that got us here, but we know we're going to need to evolve and grow, and we want you to come in and make us better. And that's part of the journey. It's not just here's your job description. It's here's a white canvas, come and make us better. And people don't believe you when you say that, if they've been in a big company, like, yeah, sure. And I'll give a great story that I think enabled me to help sort of bring that philosophy to life. My very first day at LinkedIn, Reid Hoffman walks by my office and I go, Reid, hey, it's Steve, your first head of HR. I said, you remember me? He goes, oh yeah, I remember you, Steve. I recommended you be hired. I was like, okay, great. I said, Reid, it's my first day in the job. I want to know from you, Mr. First billionaire, my LinkedIn network, what's important for me to focus on? And he didn't even bat an eye. I said, culture. I said, oh, Reid, I got you, man. I've lived in different countries, worked in different industries, whatever culture you want, I got you. And he looks at me with this huge amount of disappointment. And I'm like, oh no, my inner voice is like, you're fired and you haven't even finished your first day. Like you have just totally set him off. I've triggered him. And he paused. He said, he asked me a question. Now, keep in mind, I've been in HR for 30 years now, sitting in that role. Okay. Yeah. He asked me a question no one's ever asked me before, ever. Hey, Steve, what kind of culture do you want? And no one had ever asked me that. But here's the thing. I didn't even need to think about it. It came out of my mouth before I could even think. I want a place where I can do great work around people that make me better, feel like my contribution matters, and I want to have a life. And he goes, me too. And he walks out. And I go, what was that? Some sort of Jedi moment? Like, what was going on with that Yoda? And so I remembered that, and that's something. I was interviewing the first senior, person that we were going to try to hire from Google the next week. And he's like, well, Steve, you're the HR guy. What is it about our culture here that you really like? And I said, I think his name was Sanjay. Hey, Sanjay, let me ask you a question. What kind of culture do you want? And he says the same thing I did. I want to work on big solutions. I want to know that my work matters. I want to make a difference. I want to learn from people, and I want to have a life. And I said, me too. Come on over. Let's do that.
Yeah.
You know, and when you're a younger organization, not in terms of age, but in terms of life cycle of your company, the culture clay is soft. Invite people to help shape that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's more the goal than what should it look like, you know? And then you surround that with lots of communication, what's working well, what can work better, you know, and what can you do to be a part of that? Not what can management do for you. Do not build that dynamic, you know, if you can.
Yeah. No, that's that feels like a pretty big hack, or like in terms of just that Jedi mind trick that he pulled, like wild. And I haven't heard it, you know, I haven't heard that question, and I've been in that role, not at that level of scale, but it's pretty wild. So we've got a couple other questions here. On the recruitment side, from Felicia. She's the lead recruiter over at Hive. How did you scale your recruiting team when going through such fast growth? Like, what was your philosophy? And I know you kind of touched on a bit of that in the beginning, but like really for the team.
Okay, I'm going to answer it not in the way the question wants to hear the answer, I think. If you want to scale recruiting, it's not by adding more recruiters. It's not. It's by making sure hiring managers are clear this is a majority of your job. We had a mantra at LinkedIn, and it worked for us. It may not work for you. It may not be feasible. Candidates don't want to hear from recruiters. Candidates want to hear from hiring managers. And by the way, candidates are not working for recruiters. They're working for the hiring manager. We told our leaders, if you have one key position open, that's at least 2 days a week that you need to focus on that.
Yeah.
Not an hour each 2 days a week. 2 days a week, you need to focus on that. And you own that. That's the only way, if you're doubling in size, that you're going to solve this. And your board needs to be part of it, you know. And we would hit the fourth quarter, okay, in the fourth quarter, and our sales numbers were behind. This is how maniacal we were about this. If you're a sales leader and you're below your number for the quarter, and you've got a couple of positions open, what do you think we would tell the sales leader to do? Recruit or close deals? Recruit. Go recruit, because we're building for tomorrow, and we got to build this moat fast. And here's the thing, Martin, you know this as well as anyone. What it takes to build a company today costs less and takes less time than any time in history. You got to build your moat really, really fast. And we knew, and here was the terror moment for us. We knew that most of our traffic on LinkedIn was coming from, I don't know, maybe you guys have heard of this company, Google. And they knew how many people were coming to our site and how hard it would be for them to acquire a company that had a similar solution and try to build that out. We also knew that Facebook was growing faster than we were, and several times they bought companies that offered professional networking, you know, as a feature. And so we're like, we better figure this out, because they both have way more, you know, eyeballs, way more, you know, usage than we do, and we had to move quickly. And so it's not, and then that gets to the harder part of the equation. It's not about recruiting; it's about getting great talent, right? Not just filling, you know, heads as you're going like this. If you're trying to build something amazing, you want phenomenal people, and that's really hard when you're under the gun. You know, it's really, really hard to put the right amount of pressure. And that's why you need the hiring managers really engaged, because recruiters can serve up candidates. Hiring managers can find, you know, which ones are ideally, you know, going to really, you know, crush it most of the time.
I want to double click on that. Like I remember that challenge of like, okay, well, we need to double, triple the team, but the hiring managers don't have the time and they can't do their day-to-day job. And like, yes, in a moment of hyper growth, everybody's definitely putting in more than 40 hours a week kind of situation. I guess, and you said like, hey, if you even hiring for one role, you need to be 2 days a week on that. But if you've got like a team of 15 engineers you need to hire in 2 months or 1 month, what that person's entire schedule, that entire week is basically, from what you've said, is basically recruiting. How is there a balance of like, okay, well, I still have to do what I need to do from an engineering leader perspective or a marketing, whatever department, doesn't matter. Is there like a balance where it's like, okay, you're still getting your job done, but you're honoring this like philosophy that you've talked about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So here's what you can do and what some of our leaders did. they would close down production on their team for a day and say, all we're going to do today is all you guys are going to do is source. I want you to go through your network. I want you to qualify, give me 5 qualified leads. As soon as you do, and you call them and say, hey, we got an opening here, then you can go finish your work. But so it's not like the leader has to do it all, but they got to drive that. And if they can get the rest of their team, we would shut down the whole engineering team on Friday sometimes, say, you're not going home until you reach out to 5 friends. And some of these guys like, I don't have 5 friends, 5 people, you've worked at other places. Like, this is, we need you to do this. This is how important this is. Yeah. And, we tried everything, Martin, to help our managers, like referral bonuses and tech talks and, sourcing parties. And we learned with referral bonuses, when you throw a big number, like we literally had a bonus of $25,000 for referrals that we hired for search relevancy engineers and for data scientists, 25K. And when you do that, the amount of garbage that comes over the wall, like, hey, here's someone I know. Yeah, they went to summer camp with a data scientist. Like, that's not qualified. And so one of the things that we did that really turned the game around for us is we started to gamify it. And we would show every department in front of the company every other week when we had our company meeting, number of referrals, number of qualified referrals, number of technical phone screens, number of interviews, number of offers, offer accepts. And the amount of crap that came following us making it transparent, way down. And so we gamified it. And that was really good. And then we said, okay, forget the 25K for a hire. Here's 2K, 5K if they get an interview. If they make it all the way to an interview, just doing that. So, and that was more effective, trying to motivate the right behaviors. Yeah.
They still get the 25K if it hits?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
But we would then we would recognize the leaders that are recruiting well. We would hold them up, and we would have. Here's the other thing that we would do. We would have sessions with the CEO, the chairman, board members on how to close people when they've got bigger offers from sexier competitors for talent. Right? We would say, we're all in this together. Right? This is not just on you. Like, what's the biggest objection you hear from candidates? Okay, CEO Jeff, how would you respond to that? And they'd be like, oh my God, I got to write that down. That's a great one. So we're trying to, help our people do it, but it is a full contact team effort. There is no, recruiter metric, and I tried that, with my CEO, like, hey, Facebook's got way more recruiters than us and Twitter does, and he's like, so figure it out. I was like, okay, I'm going to have to really rely on my hiring managers. But to your point, it doesn't come without a cost, right? Dev schedules may need to be pushed out. You can't have both because you're going to just stress your leadership team out.
You've got such an interesting vantage point from like all the scale, both at companies from like 15,000 to 30,000, from 400 to 4,000, and also now with the advising work that you do and having had time to write your book. How are you? And you said like you didn't want to necessarily get into it too much, but just in terms of like knowing how important culture is, and then B, how culture effectively creates good performance or bad performance. How do you look at that now differently than you did now, especially with like, and maybe this is the AI question, but like, what are there companies going down like pretty scary paths and like you're doing this completely the wrong way versus like other companies that you're advising that are like, okay, you guys get it, you're doing it in the right way, keep going in that direction? I think there's a lot of mystery around that.
There is a lot of mystery. And here's the thing, Martin, when you're facing as many new things as we are in the world of work today, and this is one thing I can say with, high degree of certainty, leaders today are more challenged than any leadership, generation in history. There's more uncertainty. There's more change. There's the need for your staff to have newer skills faster than any time in history. And your competitive landscape is really unpredictable, right? Like Reid Hoffman one time said when he was asked at LinkedIn, which competitor scares you the most? He goes, the one that hasn't been invented yet that could change my paradigm and obsolete me overnight, right? Here we stand today and it still hasn't happened. But here's how I think about this. When I think about AI at a macro level, I feel like we have a sort of a culture problem in a technology disguised as a technology problem. Okay. AI is a culture problem disguised as a technology problem. We are trying to enforcing. Wall Street is pushing hard, boards are pushing hard, AI, and to cut costs, to reduce, expenses, to go faster, and to make people more productive, which is traditionally how we've seen technology deployed in the past. Go faster, do more, cut expenses. AI can deliver that. But what's happening is it's also being delivered with, and it can take your job. And so that fear narrative is creating a big dissonance, I believe, in the system, that if you want adoption, you got to build trust first. Okay. And that's one of the things, if I go back to LinkedIn, how do you manage through that, radical hypergrowth? You have to build a foundation of trust with your people, because stuff's going to go wrong, stuff's going to break, people are going to misunderstand stuff. And if you have a high degree of trust, there's goodwill there and forgiveness. And if there's a low degree of trust, you're going to have finger pointing, blame parties, and you're going to have, a lot of sand in the gears. And I feel right now we have, I think the report that McKinsey published the end of 2025, the State of the Union of AI, said, hey, 88% of the companies that we talk to implementing AI, 30% are seeing a rise in profit, and only 6% are seeing a material rise in profit. So they're like, what are the 6% companies doing? They are augmenting human performance. That's what they're doing with AI, not replacing it, not nuking it. And I feel like many of these companies are coming out of the gate saying, we're going to use it to cut heads. Well, that's great. I'm sure your board and your investors are really excited about that, but how's that working out with your staff?
Yeah.
And in that we have this big, mountain of fear that we're creating with this narrative of gloom and doom, even from Amodio, even from Altman, even from Mustafa Suleyman, 18 months and white collar jobs are gone. Really? Have you ever built a company, by the way? Have you ever made a profit? None of you have. So why are you saying that? And when you hear employee, you're probably just thinking software engineer. And yes, software engineers' world is dramatically changing, but there's people in factories, there's people, in restaurant. Like, what are you talking about right now? It doesn't make any sense. And stop selling the fear narrative. And the biggest one that is really tweaking me right now is this perceived elimination of entry-level work, especially espoused by these AI founders, okay? AI product founders. And I'm thinking, and to the point where I've pitched an article to the Wall Street Journal, an op-ed piece to the New York Times saying, listen, if AI is so great, why can't we make entry-level people come in at intermediate? Okay, and by the way, what generation is probably more able to become fluent with AI? The one that's working for you now, or the one that just went through COVID 4 years ago, figured out how to adapt more than any other generation of, school age kids in history. And now is like playing around with AI and can run circles around you. And yet you don't want to have entry-level people coming in your organization. Like, we're having the wrong conversation here. And that's really got me worried.
Well, I mean, I agree with you, but it's also refreshing to hear the optimism in the sense that there is, I was thinking about this yesterday in the sense that it isn't just a matter of okay, your jobs are gone. It's more a company, if you're shipping, a big feature product for your company, and we're talking SaaS here, every other week, I guess with AI, now you can do that every other day or every day. That means you still need the people to do it. It's just they can do more with less. But there is no company on the face of the earth that doesn't need to improve their product in some capacity. So we got a question here from Abiola. She's an HR business partner. Do you think LinkedIn's success today is mainly a result of the people decisions during its early growth stage, or has it evolved?
I think it made some good bets. I think we made some good bets in the early days, but you only stick around this long by evolving. And gosh, it's really hard. As you were joking earlier, Martin, I was telling you off air, I left the company a dozen years ago, and I still am reminded daily of all the things that are wrong with LinkedIn, and it's not perfect. And what's really hard is to have an audience of 1 billion members and not have a polluted experience somehow, some way. And I get them just like you do. Like, hey, are you interested in this job? Like, did you even look at my profile? No, I'm not remotely interested in that. And that's the whole foundation that LinkedIn was built on, was know me better so you can serve me something, more aligned with what I'm interested in and I want to do. So I think they're evolving. It's hard You know, imagine being in the business development office of LinkedIn, because I sat next to these guys for a while. They probably field 500 calls a day from people who've got the best new product that LinkedIn should use, or the best new feature, or the best new way. Like, everyone's got a point of view. To be as relevant for so many people and becoming a real trusted publishing platform, not just a recruiting tool, is a testament to their staying power. You don't stay around this long without adapting. So I think they've done some good, done some good things.
Got time for a couple more questions here. Again, loving this conversation and loving these insights. Did not expect them, but obviously knew there were going to be awesome answers. But just some different angles here, which has been really interesting. I guess yeah, you've gone scaled the mountain. You've written a book. It's called Workquake. Maybe can you kind of like give us some behind the scenes of like what sparked it? Why'd you
Sure.
want to write it, and where's it coming from? What are you trying to accomplish with it?
Yeah, any HR person will tell you, we have a front row seat to the employer-employee relationship. And what inspired me to write the book was I felt a growing dissatisfaction from both parties, employers and employees, around this compact is just broken. We're starting every relationship, and I talk about this in the introduction of my book, of how I left Electronic Arts to go to LinkedIn after only having been in Electronic Arts for less than a year and a half. And I took such grief and I got such flack. And my boss who hired me took such flack from the executive team. Like, how could you hire this short timer? And so think about it. Most companies today begin with a false shared agreement with a candidate. Come here and stay a long time, and we'll promise to employ you a long time. We both know it's probably something neither of us will live up to, but let's start our relationship on a false understanding. And
Yeah.
I'm like, we need something more motivational. And so that's what I try to do in the book, is spark conversations where it's saying like, hey, one of the things that I'm doing with companies today is like, in the interview, ask them, what do they want to do when they leave your company? And they're like, what? Do an exit interview before I've made them an offer? Yeah, because there's more choice and more movement today, and people are staying at organizations shorter. It's inevitable because people can see opportunity on a scale we couldn't see 20 years ago. It just, they're not going to stay. They want to taste something different, and that's wonderful, but it's also paralyzing when you have so many choices. So become an advocate for them for their career, not just care about them when they work for you, And I call that the anti Tony Soprano school of HR. You quit, you're dead to me. Like, people are going to leave. They're not going to stay as long. And if I ask any business leader or anyone listening today, do you think in the future people will truly stay at companies longer? Like, we're going at, like, in the last 5 years, people staying in the United States, non-farm working professionals staying in jobs from 5 years to about 3.8 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And in Silicon Valley, software engineers, what, barely 2 years, if that.
Yeah.
Do you think that's going to change in the future? That, oh yeah, people are definitely going to stay longer. The answer 99% of the time is no, they're probably not. But what we haven't done is built to expect that. And
Yeah.
that's part of the rub, right? If I know you're probably only going to stay 2 years, Martin, as soon as I, hire you, I want to build you to be an advocate when you leave. I want to be constantly recruiting. I want to help, understand. I need you to be productive within 3 to 6 months. I can't have you take 5 years to learn how to do what you're doing. You see what I'm saying? Like, we've got to re-engineer jobs to optimize for shorter stays, and then create alumni communities and angels in the universe so that we're still embracing that. And professional sports and college athletics in the United States are great examples of your best people stay 1 year. That's it. And you know it. And so
Mhm.
if you know your best players are only going to stay 1 year, what do? You recruit all the time. And when they leave, they tell about how great it was to play for you,
Yeah.
so other people want to come join you, right? It's really hard right now.
I mean, I've kind of seen this, and I've got an interesting bubble that I live in on the people and talent HR recruitment side. But we're kind of seeing and hearing this sort of almost to the point of inverse. Not only are people staying at organizations less and less, but people are taking on two roles. Like there was that meme out there where that one software engineer had like 20 different gigs and was employed by 20 different companies, and that was like 6 months ago. And obviously that's like an extreme outlier example of something that, but there's definitely folks that are working full time, they're picking up fractional work, and they're being transparent about it with their organizations. Maybe their organizations are scaling back how much time. So it's not even, it's like, I guess, do you see that trend increasing? I'd just be curious to see like what you're thinking of in terms of the future.
I hear more talk about a patchwork and a portfolio of work than I see it in practice, right?
Right.
And my personal take is if you're doing your job and you can take on another job and you want to make your life better for your family, good on you. Go
Mhm.
for it.
Yeah.
You should have the right to do that. And if a company is pissed because you got another job, but you're meeting their goals, that's on them to, raise the, expectations that they have for you. Like if you're doing what they asked of, why shouldn't you have another opportunity? So that change isn't happening as fast as the rhetoric around it happening is. And I think those people doing three jobs and haha, I've got a, huge paycheck, those are more outliers than they are a rising trend from my perspective.
Um, any final, we're coming up to time here. Really appreciate you doing this, Steve. It's been a ton of great questions from the audience.
Sure.
Thanks, folks. But any kind of final thoughts
I
that you want
do.
to
I do.
leave with the audience?
You know, so how do we navigate a world where we can't phone a friend? There is no benchmarking that we can do because no one's been through what we're going through right now. The way we do that is we have to become the benchmark. And the way you become the benchmark is you build cultures that really foster experimentation. This is why I love the universe of technology companies. The openness to experiment is much greater than it was when I worked in fashion or insurance, where in insurance we used to have a meeting to decide who's going to be invited to the meeting. Like that's the kind of universe. And in tech, you bump into someone in the hallway, you have the meeting, and then you go back to your cube and you implement. So I think we're all going to have a little more courage to foster experimentation. The companies that are adopting AI are not doing it because they've got a thoughtful strategy and 300 Oracle consultants implementing this stuff. They're doing it because they've built a foundation of trust, and they're saying, "Hey, we don't know if this agentic AI stuff's really right for this role. Can you play around with it and see how it is?" And if you've not built a culture of trust, experimentation will never fly. You know, it'll always be, "Well, you go first, and let me see what happens to you when
Yeah.
you fail, and then maybe I'll do it."
Yeah.
And so that's really those of you who have an influence over the culture of your company, be mindful of that and build a trust strategy. I think it's more important now than ever before. And have the conversations with your employees. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of AI? Okay, let's have the conversation, because chances are the person asking the question is afraid too, right? Like we're just skipping ahead, implement, and there's a lot of visceral fear under the covers, and that sort of passive aggressive resistance that could build is poison, and we gotta do a better job of that. So those are sort of the closing thoughts top of mind for me right now, building trust.
No, no. Very, very top of mind. Very helpful. Amazing insights. What are some of the best ways for folks to get in touch with you, and where can they find your book, and just drop us a couple places to keep in
Sure.
touch with you? Of
Yeah, and again, thanks, Martin, for this really
course.
important conversation and the community that you're building and helping. You can find me on this platform, LinkedIn. I hear it's a pretty good platform. Please connect with me, follow me, ask me questions if you want. Workquake, one word. You can find it anywhere books are sold. I do have a website, stevecadigan.com, and I also have, much to my children's surprise, a TikTok channel with
Oh,
closing in on 2 million likes of my content. And I have a
oh wow.
series there called True Stories from Corporate America. And if you are in human resources or leadership, you are going to be rolling on the floor laughing. And these are actual true stories that have happened. One I will just tease, where a CEO one time said, "Have I ever asked you about my compensation? I really don't care about my money." To which I said, "Well, then why don't you do what, this executive over here did and said they're just going to take $1 this year. If you really don't care, just take it down to $1." Well, not really.
Pump the brakes. Let's
Yeah.
hold on a
So
second. Yeah.
call that one out right away.
Yeah.
But no, I really appreciate this conversation and the opportunity to spar with you a little bit. It's been
Yeah.
fun.
No, Steve, great time. I'm going to find you on TikTok. Thanks again. And this will be posted in the People group. Big shout out to Kiara in the background. She's been answering questions this whole time. Thanks for your help, Kiara, and our friends at WorkLeap. And thanks again. Thanks. thanks again, Steve. Have an awesome weekend.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Take care, everyone.